and welcome to Newfoundland and Labrador Studies 2205. This is Unit 3, The Country Grows. Section 4, Lesson 4, Video 1, Newfoundland and Labrador Goes to War. I'm Miss Fleming. Let's get started. Before we begin, I wanted to discuss a few things. It is easy for people now not to think about the effects of the two world wars, thinking of them as happening so long ago. We have distanced ourselves from that, but that is not the reality. The truth is we are all affected by these wars, even today. To help us understand this, let's consider the following quote from David French's Soldier's Heart. It was a waste of time. Things happen in war that can never be forgotten, never be forgiven. Things that a man just has to live with. It's his punishment. The people who signed up to go overseas did not know the trauma that would be inflicted on their lives. Great Britain declared war on Germany on August 4th, 1914. This brought the entire British Empire, including Newfoundland and Labrador, into the conflict. The decision for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians was not whether to enter the war, but how. Edward Norris put in motion a regiment for service in Europe. And the Newfoundland Patriotic Association, or NPA, was established to recruit people and manage the war effort as a whole. The NPA was an extra-parliamentary body, meaning outside of elected government, and it was run by Governor Sir Walter Davidson. This image here is of Alpha Company of the Newfoundland Regiment, some of the first to go overseas. Within 2 months, the National Patriotic Association had the first 500, which is actually 537 men, also known as the Blue Puttees, trained and ready to head overseas. Now I wanted to pause for a moment at that notion, the Blue Puttees, because I always knew what the term was growing up, meaning the Newfoundland Regiment, they were called the Blue Puttees, but I never was told why. Puttees, if you're unaware, are bands of fabric that connect the top of the boots with the bottom of the pants to ensure that there isn't a gap between the two. It is to help keep feet dry and warm. The fabric used for puttees usually was green, matching uniforms. But Newfoundland and Labrador didn't have access to this fabric, as it was part of the British military. So they had to do with what they had. The broadcloth that they had was only in blue, so they had to make their puttees out of blue fabric, which made them stand out from everybody else. On October 3rd, 1914, the soldiers marched from their training camp to the SS Florizel, a steamer that was transformed into a troop ship to take them overseas. Through the NPA, volunteers continued to be recruited, trained, and shipped off to Europe until a Department of Militia was formed in 1917. Other than the Newfoundland Regiment, many men enrolled in the armed forces and unarmed forces. Armed forces examples such as the Royal Naval Reserve and the Canadian Armed Forces. Unarmed forces were the Merchant Marine Corps and the Forestry Corps. Unarmed forces meant that they weren't involved in the act of fighting. A Merchant Marine Corps transported soldiers back and forth and also supplies. The Forestry Corps cleared land of lumber and transported lumber to be used in the war effort. And additionally, about 175 women served overseas as volunteer aid detachment nurses in European military hospitals, as nurses, ambulance personnel, cooks, clerks, and maids. Newfoundland experienced rapid social, political, and economic changes during the First World War, and some people call it what's called a boom and bust. Young men from all over the island and Labrador went to St. John's to train, and then travelled overseas. Political parties united in the war effort, and the local economy boomed. It exploded. Some countries temporarily left the cod industry, leaving Newfoundland as a main supplier of fish to Europe. It was also a cheap protein, so it was easy for people to transport and to eat. forest and mining industries benefited from the need for lumber and iron ore overseas as well. Although wartime inflation increased the costs of some imports, rising wages helped offset those expenses. And for the fiscal year ending in June 1918, the Newfoundland government had a surplus of over $1.1 million, and at that time it was the largest surplus in the colony's history. When armistice was signed on November 11, 1918, Newfoundland and Labrador faced post-war problems, with those who served having to readjust to civilian life and deal with their trauma. I wanted to include these two images because of the juxtaposition between them. The top is of King George V and senior naval officers on board a ship after the armistice. They're happy, they're joyful, because it all is coming to an end. But this image here is from a group of soldiers who are gathered around a plane wreckage. You can see in their faces it is not the same for them. And they brought that trauma home. The economic boom also came to an end, which caused other domestic problems, which we'll talk about in future videos. Now it's time to continue to the next video. Make sure you take a break, though, if you need one, and I'll see you in a bit.